在哪边？位置哪？你问我可以借你的 extension。你问8分。不用了。我要喜欢远程。
不小心咳嗽了。
I cannot extend now. I haven't changed yet. My plan is to extend it until Sunday.
Next Sunday.
I will see first whether I can extend further or not. Because I have done some changes. So I will see whether I can extend further. But at the moment, until Sunday, just Sunday.
This part I do the tools, so I put the development tools, hardware, software. We mentioned in the FIP for report also. And I put my interface, just some main one in there.
Can you send me yours?
Okay.
Thank you.
example because the first thing is simple. Second thing is you can see the effect. Right? If you don't have GPU at home, your computer at home, you can always use Colab. In Colab, you can actually install OpenCV. Okay? You go and check on the internet how to install OpenCV in Colab. Then you put your image, you don't have to be this image, your own image. Then you run your code, which is down below here, and then display it. So you can open with the file using OpenCV, JPEG or PNG or whatever file, like that. And then you do the processing, and then you display like that. Okay, use OpenCV to help you display it. Alright, this is blurring of the image. I'll explain later, but the simple one is actually to change it to grayscale. Right? You create this color, then you use this algorithm that I'll show you here. Okay, and then you do this grayscale image processor. Okay, and then you display it again. You should be grayscale like this after you process it. Okay. Now, put picture which is large. If it is too small, you cannot see the performance gain much. Okay? Use a large picture. Not a small picture like this, bigger one. Now, of course, when you do this, please also take note of the performance gain because it is not just converting into grayscale. You also want to find the performance gain. That means you try to do this grayscaling using a single track. That means your processor will do all the job on its own. And then you capture the time, and then you pass this job to GPU and see how much time GPU spend in order to get the same image. That means grayscale image. Okay, this one maybe the GPU can be very, very fast. In fact, the CPU can be very, very fast as well. That's why I suggested we use a bigger image, not a small image, a large image. Now the next one is actually also image processing, just that you want to blur. Okay, how much you blur depending on how you take the average. The size of the average, I'll go into that in a short while. So the idea is very simple. Take the same image, blur it, and then display it, right? Now, when you blur the image, this is down there. In this code, it can be difficult to understand because you're scared of looking at the fence and looking at the code. But let me explain the idea first so that it's easier for you to grab the idea. Now, this example actually is quite important because in the exam, I have one full question from GPU alone. Okay? This problem is much harder than the question that I put in my exam. My exam question is slightly simpler. But then, what I want to show you is this condition here. You have to check this condition. Make sure that you know how to check the condition. Okay, this condition is more complex than an exam question. But it's kind of similar, so you need to understand this point. Okay, so the whole idea is this. If let's say I have a picture, okay, and if I take this pixel here, right, I want to determine the final color of this picture, or the intensity of this picture. Basically, when you blur the image, this basically is the intensity that you manipulate. Okay? Take note you have R, you got G, you got B. So you got two components here. So you have to see one by one. So the red first, and then you deal with the green, and then you deal with the blue. Okay, so let's suppose this is red color. Okay, the green and the blue is the same. And this particular node, maybe I make it bigger because maybe I'm not able to see it. If I expand this out like this, So suppose this is the pixel. Right? This small pixel here, I expand it. And you know that it has neighbors, right? It has its own neighbor. This pixel here, this small pixel here, expand it. Is this pixel that I'm talking about? This one, right? But this pixel actually has neighbor. Okay, they have neighbor. And in order to find, or in order to blur this image, this particular pixel, what we do is we take this, plus this, plus this, plus this, plus itself, plus this, plus this, plus this, plus this, and then divide by 9. Okay? That means we take the average intensity. Okay, the average intensity. So basically, if you take all this surrounding intensity of this red color, suppose this is a red color, right? If you take the neighboring pixel intensity and you add them together and divide by 9, and then you replace that original intensity with this average intensity. Basically, if you do that for all the pixels, the image becomes blurred. Do you agree? Right. Because I take the surrounding and I find the average. It basically blends to the surrounding. So the intensity here will blend to the surrounding. Basically meaning that it becomes blurred. Okay? Now if I do this for all the pixels, I'll get the blurred image. So my job is actually to find where do I start, where do I end. Okay? So I start from here, and then I go this column, and this column, right? And then I go to the second row, the first column, second, third. And I go to the third row, first column, second column, and third column. Okay? And when I'm doing the adding, okay? And then finally I divide by 9 because they're not all together. Therefore I get an average intensity for the particular pixels. And that is actually done here, done in this code. Okay? So it looks kind of scary, but then actually it's what I mentioned to you. Okay, let's look at the first for loop first. The outer for loop is actually the row. The inner for loop is the column. So when you loop the inner loop first, right? You loop finish, and then only you go out, and then you come in and loop again. And then when you finish the inner loop, then you go out, and then the condition is not is still false, so it's still true, and then you enter into this loop again. So you loop this many times, as many times as the outer loop, right? So let's look at the inner loop. The inner loop is actually traveling like this. The first column, because it's column, right? Column, first column, the second column, the third column. So that is the for loop. Okay, so it's 3 times here. And then when you get out on this for loop, the inner for loop, you go into the outer for loop. The outer for loop actually is handling the row. So first row, second row, third row. So it goes like this. The inner for loop, and then go to the outer for loop, inner for loop, outer for loop, and then inner for loop. Get it? Okay. So what is this initial value? Okay, we start at the center here, right? We start at the center here. So if I want to go here, to go to this place here, isn't that, okay, here going in this direction is positive. Okay, going downward here is positive. Okay, so positive in the x direction, positive in the y direction. Okay, or I should say, this one is the column direction. This is the row direction. Okay? So going downward is positive, going to the right is positive for column. Okay? This one is for the row. Okay. So why there is a minus sign there? The reason is because remember my actual pixel is this. If I go up, that means I go against this direction. That means it's negative, right? So that's why it's negative here. Okay, the same thing. The column, the first column is here, not here. This is the second column, the third one is here. So I have to go one step to the left. Okay, that means that's why the column is negative, the row is negative. Okay, negative because I have to go up, negative because I have to go left. Because this is the first one. Okay, so the first one. Okay. Okay, so how about the blur size? Now the blur size is how many pixels that you want to take into account in order to blur this image. So if you take bigger size here, I take a small size. I can take even bigger one. The bigger one will be like this. So we'll cover what's like smaller. We'll cover like this. So this one will be like this. Okay? So it will be bigger, right? So this is the first layer. This is the outer layer, the second layer. This is the second layer. Okay? So if I take the second layer in, that means my blur size is going to be increased, right? So if I use only the inner layer, this layer, that means blur size is only 1. Right? Because it's 1, right? But if I put blur size is 2 here, that means it's 2. 1, 2. Okay? Now the larger this affected area to compute this average pixel, okay, the larger it is, the blurrer the image is going to be. So if I put this blur size here, bigger and bigger, the image becomes blurrer and blurrer, right? So this blur size, let's see what is the initial value. I think it's 1, right? It's not written. Okay, it's not written, but trust me, the blur size is what I talked about. Okay? So if the blur size is 1, we only take this. Okay, if 2, then you take all this. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 5 is 1. So 5 times 5 is 25. So it's 25 pixels altogether. So you have to divide by 25. Okay, let's say this is blur size is 2. Okay, if blur size is 1, it's only 9. Right? Okay, so that is how it is done. So initially, your current row will be the row plus the below row. So the current row is this one. Let's say I'm talking about blur size of 1. That means I'm talking about this below. Okay, I'm talking about this below. Let's go back to here. Alright. So my row is this one. Blur row, when you start the blur row is minus 1. Minus 1 means this is second row plus minus 1, so it's here, it's this row. Okay? So that is the current row. And then about the current column. Current column is the column, this is my own column. And then when I start my blur column, is minus 1 as well. Okay, minus 1, that means my column is here, minus 1 goes to the left. So basically it's this. Okay, so the current row, current column is pointing to this pixel. Okay, okay. Now this one is very important. As I mentioned to you that this part is the one that can take care in exam. Okay, if let's say your pixel here, the surrounding is fine because the surrounding of this pixel here is within this image, right? But what if my pixel is right over here at the corner? At the corner there. Okay, now you have a problem. Why? The neighbor here, down and to the left, is alright. It's there. Okay? But the neighbor at the top and to the right is not there because it's outside the image and you have to take care of that. That's why there's an if statement. If statement. If statement here is to check whether the neighbor is there or not there. Okay? In this case, because it's in the middle of the image, the neighbor is there, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay? And in fact, this if statement is checked for all pixels. So this one will detect that all this neighbor is there, right? Now if I expand this image, if I expand this image, so you've got one pixel here, which is this pixel, and you look carefully. To the top is empty, to the left is empty, but at the bottom here, there is a pixel, there is a neighbor pixel, there is also a neighbor pixel here. Okay? But this one is not there, this one is not there, this one is not there as well, this one is not there, this one is not there. Is that good? True or not? Okay? So, what you need to do is, you need to add only this. This. You don't add this, you don't add this, you don't add this, you don't add this, and you don't add this because it's outside the image. Okay? And this one is easily checked. You can see that current row, if it is less than the width, let's talk about the width. The width is this one. The width of the image. So the width is W here, the height here is H. Okay? So I check whether this pixel here, maybe this pixel, is this pixel outside this width. Okay? So if this pixel is outside the width, then this will fail. Okay? It will check the current row, current column. Current column is less than the width, then we take it. Okay? Here, of course, it's within, but here it is not. Okay? The same thing for this. Here is not as well. Right? This one also is not. And therefore you will fail this. If you fail this, then this will fail. This will and then this is not going to be executed. Right? Now the same thing for all this. Now how about the height? Okay, let's look at the height. Okay, the height, you look at this one first. Now that height is here is 0, isn't it? Now if you go up, it will be minus value, right? Minus 1. So in this case, you check whether this is bigger than 0 or equals to 0 or less than 0. If it is less than 0, we'll take it. If it is bigger or equal to 0, then you allow it. Basically, you just check that. Is this minus 1 or bigger than 0? If bigger than 0 or equals to 0, you take it. If it is not, then you will fail this and then you will get okay? So I'm at this corner. That's why I talk about this condition and this condition. Now how about this condition and that condition? This condition is actually looking at this pixel here. Pixel at this corner. Okay? Right, and also the corner here and the corner here. So this fourth condition is to check. Okay, is to check whether this pixel, the neighboring pixel, exists. If it does not exist, you shouldn't come. Okay. Now, how do I know the number of cells that I take? For example, in this case here is full, right? So it will be 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? And that is actually done here, pixel plus. So if let's say I succeeded and I found out that this is inside this image, then pixel plus. You increment it by 1. Okay? And then when I do this, if this is inside the test successful, then you increment by 1. So as I get to this point here, my pixel will be 9. I will keep track of that. Okay, let's take this example here. If I start here, it fail, right? So the pixel will not increment by 1. So it remains 0. Then I move on to the next one. Also not within the image, so it will not increment because it will never enter into this statement. Okay? Then I move to the next one. Also fail. But this one, yes, you enter and then you compute the pixel value, and then you increment pixel to 1. So it's from 0 to 1. Here also within. So pixel become 2. Here fail. The condition you will not enter, so pixel remain as 2, 3, 4. And here, when you get it here, it will not count, so it's only 4. So it knows that you will divide by 4. Okay? So that is done by counting. You use the pixels to count. This is very good. Right? Now this one is actually the original image. Okay, the original image. Look at the current plus the width plus the current column. Why do we need to multiply by width? Is because here is 2 dimensions, but when you put it into the memory, actually it's 1 dimension, right? So the second row is the first row. The second row is the row number, which is row number 0, and row number 1 is the next row. 1 times W is the width, right? So you skip the first row, and the second row actually starts next to the first row. That's why you have to multiply by W. Okay? And then current column is the column. So if your column is 0, so you start at 0 on the second row. Okay? And the second column actually is the second column of the second row. Because the second row data is actually next to this first row data in memory. But of course, in image, it looks like 2 dimensions. So actually here is actually finding the information of that 2 dimensions in linear memory. Okay, so this is the original image in the array. Okay, so once I compute the pixel value, now I divide by this and get the average, and then I put it back into the output. Is actually the image of the output array. Okay, it's the same thing. I also use the row, and then multiply by width plus the column. Okay, it's basically the same concept. It's basically this pixel here, because this pixel is the row and also is the column. Okay. Now this one is different. This current row and current column is actually coming from is derived from here. Because remember, the for loop actually move around. Okay, it moves. So this value will change constantly. It will change as you progress. As you loop, this value will change. But the output one will not change because the output is stationary here. Okay? Right? The current row and current column actually go in as you compute the average, but your original column and row actually is multiple point there. That's why we use this, not this variable, but we use this variable. Okay? So basically that is how the averaging is done. And I think you can get the idea, right? If you don't understand, maybe I'm not sure whether you understand, right? But I explain it. Okay, I hope that you can try this. Actually, this is a working program. Just that it does not specify the blur size. The blur size you can put it as 1. Okay, if you put it as 1, then you actually blur according to this surrounding. 2, then it's bigger. Okay, as you increase the size, you see the image become blurred and blurred. Okay, so for that particular example, this kind of example, you'll find out that even though I do the blurring, I don't have to worry much about dependency. Why? Because if I look at this pixel here, I just require the surrounding pixels in order to find out what is the intensity we use for this particular pixel in order to blur, right? So I don't have to wait. Let's say, for example, each pixel here is done by each track. All of them run in parallel. They can look for their neighbor and then process it. Because why? Because you got the original image and the output image. The original image is the in array, the output image is the out array. So when the data is written into the out array, not the in array, right? The in array will be the same, it does not change. Okay? That means the surrounding pixel color doesn't change. Okay? As I go and find this information, I look at the in array. The array doesn't change. The out array will change, of course, because after you get the output result, right? So that means all this thread is able to run concurrently. So we have no problem. So the two examples all have this kind of similarities. And in that case, we can get a very, very good performance gain. Okay, the performance gain is absolutely very good. And luckily, a lot of problem is of that kind. Okay, if you are doing image processing, most of the problem is, that's why it's easy. Okay, it's easy to solve. I'm not saying that the algorithm is easy, the algorithm can be very difficult, but your problem is easy because you don't have dependency problem. But right now, I'm going to talk about a problem where you have a lot of dependencies. Okay? There are problems which is not like as good as this. Okay? For example, if I want to compute this, let's say for example, I need to wait for other thread to computing this one first. Then only I can take the result and then compute this. If you have that kind of problem, that means it depends on the result of the other thread. That means you're waiting for the other thread, then you have a problem. So how do we identify that? Okay, let's look at this classification. So this is Handler classification. Handler actually is a name of the computer scientist. His name is, his full name is Wolfgang Handler, most probably in German. Has proposed a classification scheme to identify the degree of parallelism that you can do. Okay? For example, in this case here, the degree of parallelism is 100%, but some problem is not 100%, right? So not 100%, you can categorize them into 3 different subsystems. First is at the processor control level. Second is at the arithmetic logic unit level. And finally is at the bit level circuit. So the most primitive or the lowest level is actually at the level. Okay? This is at the top level, so this is the highest level. But even though this higher level actually is in the processor itself. So we are talking about the GPU and the CPU itself. So process control unit, whether you can have parallelism at this level. So if you are talking about this level, that means it's about processor to processor parallelism or core to core parallelism. Okay? Now, when we go down one step, now within the core or within the processor, can we do parallelism? Okay? That means that is at the arithmetic, that means at the computation level, because each core will have its own ALU, right? Okay? But then you can have ALU, I'm not sure whether you have heard of this term before. Single instruction, multiple data. Have you heard of this term? Okay, maybe you haven't seen this instruction before because if you learn assembly language of x86 or x64, you might not have learned this because it's not shown to you, but your computer, not only it has a multiple processor or multiple core, but the instruction itself is a single instruction, but that single instruction can manipulate many data. I'm not sure whether you know this, right? So in fact, for example, in this case here, I want to add this, right? In my program just now, I showed you that I add one by one. Add with this, 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 right? But if let's say you have a single instruction multiple data, the single instruction can add this tree in one instruction. Okay? In fact, our Intel processor has this instruction. You can tell the instruction that take these 3 pixels and then add them together. So that is single instruction, multiple data, because you have multiple data. But the action is actually adding, right? It's adding these 3 together, meaning that it is the same action, same instruction. Okay, so you can do in 1 instruction, 2 instructions, 3 instructions, rather than 9 instructions. Okay? So that is arithmetic logic. Can you do that or not? So here is asking you, if let's say for example, these pixels are independent of one another, they are not relying on anything, then you can run this single instruction multiple data at this level. So you can do parallelism at this level. But if this pixel here is computed by another process or another thread or another core, and you are relying on the data, and you rely on the other core to finish it, then you cannot execute this because you have to wait. You have to wait for this call to finish and this call to finish. Once they finish, then you can execute it. So there's a waiting or dependency exists. Okay? So this dependency is at the arithmetic level, not at the core level. Yeah? The last one is utility level is talking about, just now I talked about the arithmetic, which is the logic unit, like for example, plus, multiply, divide, and all that, right? That's the arithmetic level. The big level is the data itself. So inside this data, you got bits, right? 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, something like that. Okay? Now, are they all independent of one another? If they're all independent of one another, then I can process them together. Okay? That means I can take this, maybe process the neighboring data. But each pixel here, if let's say it depends on other process to change it, okay, then I have to wait. So that is at the bit level. Okay? So arithmetic level is at this level. Bit level is looking at the data bit itself. That is the lowest level. Okay? On top of arithmetic is the processor level. That means multiple cores, whether they are parallel or not. Right? Okay, so these are the classification that we can handle propose. Actually, it's very long time ago. Even before we have advanced computer already, he actually classified. Of course, nowadays we use this terminology, subsystem level, in order to differentiate the level of parallelism that we make. Okay, let's look at the dependency. So just now I talked about the classification, what level we can look into. Now what we want to see here is something that is observed, that maybe is on the processor level, okay? Processor level. Now, how do we define dependency first? Okay. So let's say this is the statement. Okay. We want to find out whether it has any dependency on this statement. So there are two statements. Okay. If let's say they have dependency, meaning that this instruction is dependent on this instruction. Okay? Let's say it has dependency. If let's say it has no dependency, that means these two instructions do not have any dependency. So that means you can run both of them in parallel. If they have dependency, it means that you cannot run them in parallel. Just that. Okay? So dependency means if you have dependency, you cannot run in parallel. So how do you solve this problem? You run them in sequential. Okay? So suppose if these two statements is independent, they don't depend on one another. I can allow one processor to run this, and I can allow another processor to run this in parallel without worrying about anything. Okay? But then, if let's say it is dependent on one another, the best thing is to run them in serial. That means run this first, then only run this. Who's going to run it? One processor. Because one processor, the order is guaranteed. If this statement appear first, this statement appear later, that processor will ensure that this will run first, then only this. Is it right? Right? So the easiest way is to assign to one processor. Of course, you can say, how about if I assign to two different processors? Can also, this core number 1, this is core number but then you need to have some kind of synchronization between them. Core number 2 cannot execute that. It has to wait for this to finish first. So you have to synchronize. That means you have to use one of the synchronization algorithm that we learned before. Right? So once this guy finishes, you will signal to the other processor, then the other processor will continue to execute. But of course, in this case here, there will be no parallelism. So it's equivalent to assigning these two statements to be executed by one single call. Much easier, right? Because you do not need any synchronization here. Okay? So the best is actually to assign to one core or one processor if you have dependency. Okay? But here, of course, we are trying to find out whether we can assign to different track or different core. Okay, if we can assign to different core, that means you can gain, you can have a performance gain. Okay, so here is to find whether the dependency is within the iteration of the loop or not. Okay, why it is a loop? Because most of the time we can actually get parallelism in or performance gain if there's an iteration here. Okay, so that's why it's focus. Okay, goal of determining different relationship between the statements so that we are aware how they are related. Okay, if they are not related, so we don't have to worry. If they are related, how are they related? Okay. The third one is to allow multiple processors to work on different portions of the loop in parallel. So if let's say we found that they are independent, then we can allow. But if let's say they are dependent, how do we find a way to allow multiple processors to work on different portions in parallel? Okay. First, what we need to do is we analyze the dependencies within the individual loop, see if we can find any way to actually improve. Sometimes it looks like it is dependent, but actually it's not dependent. It's actually independent. So you need to know how to analyze, how to identify it. I'll show you some examples. It looks like it's dependent, but actually it's not. But if you run a program without any change, you will fail because it's actually dependent. So you have to change the program a little bit without changing the algorithm. You just need to change something without changing the result, and it becomes independent. I'll show you some examples later. Right? Okay, there are two general categories of dependencies. The first one, which I'm going to look at first, is the data dependency. So we look at the data one. The second one is a control dependency. So this one, control means is if else statement. If else statement kind of code. So there's a code. It relates to how the code executes. Okay. The first one, it doesn't look at how the code executes. It's just looking purely at the data. The second one is control dependency. There's a code dependency. There's also a control dependency. It depends on how the code executes. Yeah. Once we have the if-else statement, you see that the code sometimes executes, sometimes don't execute, depending on the condition, right? So that is control dependency. Related to the control dependency. Okay, let's have a look at the first one. This one is a simple one. For dependency analysis, just telling you that you need to identify whether there's any dependency here. So in this case here, this is one matrix multiplication. There's no dependency exists for this kind of processing. So A, you read from A, this A doesn't change, it is always stay the same. B, the matrix B also doesn't change, the data doesn't change, so you can actually drag from that. And the neighbor also doesn't affect the other neighbor. And when you compute, you put it into another matrix. So this matrix here also does not affect the neighbor. So in this case here, it's 100%, you can apply 100% parallelism. Okay, once you know that you have zero dependency, next is how do you transform this so that you can get parallel computing. Okay, I always talk about GPU. I always talk about multiple processors that's running. Because I'm talking about processor degree of parallelism, right? But actually, this one is trying to talk about arithmetic or ALU parallelism. Okay, remember ALU parallelism? ALU parallelism, why you can do parallelism? Because you got some instruction, which is single instruction, multiple data. Okay, that means you got one instruction which can perform this task in parallel at ALU level. So this processor, I'm not sure what kind of processor is it, never mentioned. It has 64 words. This is actually quite big. I don't think our processor has this. Maybe yes, maybe yes, the later version of processor. 64 words. So one word is 32 if I'm not mistaken. That means you got 32 bits plus times 64. That is quite huge. The largest one I know is 512 bits. Okay, so if you have a single instruction multiple data, that means you got 64 pieces of data, different data, that you can execute in one instruction. Okay, so assuming that this data is one piece, this data is also one piece, right? But you can actually, if you use this single instruction multiple data, you can get 64 of this, multiply with this 64 in one instruction. Okay, so this instruction can perform. Okay, I'm talking about ALU parallelism. Our processor can do that. Okay, then how do we convert it? We convert it by this is already done, right? I should keep looking at this person. Okay, this is the original program. Okay, original program. If you do it one by one, without taking into account the ALU parallelism. But since our processor, we know that it's capable of ALU parallelism, and I also identified that this one has 100% parallelism possibility. Okay, so how do I convert it? So I need to transform it. So this code maybe it's not very clear to you. What it means is this: I take from 1 to n. The step size is 64. So I process 64 pieces of data at one go. Okay. This kind of notation actually is not C++. This one is Java. Sorry, it's not Java. Python. Anybody here learn Python? You learn Python, right? Have you seen this before? 1 colon a number colon a number. Yeah, it's indexing. So you go from 1 to n. Okay, every loop you add 64. It means that. Yeah. Oh, sorry, add 63. Sorry, the top one is 64. Bottom one is this one is going to be y at 63. It's supposed to be x 64 y 64. Okay. So the first number is 1, the next number is 64, the next number is 130. Okay. If you start from 2, the next number is 65, and then the next number is 1. So this is done by one processor, this is done by another processor. Okay? You can look at it later. But if you look at sorry, I shouldn't say that. Because I'm talking about value parallelism, right? So 0 to 63 is done by a single instruction multiple data. Okay, and then I move on to the next one, the next 64. 64 until 127. Okay? So this is another SIMD. And then I move on to the next one, which is 128. Okay, until some number at 64, and then you get a number that will be 172, right? Okay. So if you were to use normal instruction, then you have to do how many times? If let's say this is 172, then you need 172 instructions to finish computing this. But if you use a single instruction multiple data instruction, where you can process 64 word vectors at the same time, then how many do you need? You need only 3. Compare this with this. You see there's performance gain, a lot of performance gain, right? So this is at the processor level, that means at the ALU level. Okay? So how do I change my code? I change my code like this. So I need to change from there to there. If I don't change, of course, it will not take full use of my single instruction multiple data. You use the original instruction where you will execute 172 times. So it will be slow. If I change this, of course I will tell, so it's not exactly like this. have to use some kind of inline function in order to tell the compiler, please use the single instruction multiple data to process this. Okay, so that is the transformation that I need to do. Okay, so what are the conditions that we look into in order to identify whether it is safe to do the statements of the iteration in parallel? Okay, so there are three conditions here. This three condition is known as Bernstein condition. It's first published in the paper 1966 paper. That is very early stage of our computer era. The silicon computer came out in late 1970s. Okay, so this one is before our silicon computer come out. At this time, they're using a different kind of computer. Not silicon. The computer is very large. You can fit this whole room here. Okay, running at kilobit per second, kilobyte per second, kilohertz. So when he came up with this idea, he said this: if it passed this condition, that means the iteration can be run in parallel. Okay. So what are they? The first one, if the first iteration does not write into the location read by the second iteration. Okay. So it's got the iteration we call for loop, right? And so for example, I do the for loop. The second for loop here, this one is the first for loop. This is the second loop. Now if my data here does not depend on the previous one, okay, does not depend on the previous one, that means it's independent. So how do we find that? Okay, let's say for example in this case, iteration 1 does not write into the location that is read by iteration 2. Let's say I have the iteration 1 is processed here, okay, and let's say I write back into my data here, okay, and this actually rely on it, or rely on other memory that is done by iteration 1. That means this is actually dependent on the previous one, right? So it's very logical. If iteration 1 write into the location read by iteration 2, that means this is iteration 2 has to wait for iteration 1 to complete, and therefore you cannot do it in parallel. So if we break this first condition, you know that loop has problem. You cannot do it in parallel. Okay? Now the second one is actually the same as the first, except that you look at the other two iterations. So if iteration 2 does not write into the location that is read by iteration 1. Just now, this iteration rely on this. Now is this iteration rely on the second iteration, is the reverse. Okay? It's also the same. No matter which iteration it is, if they are relying on one another, you will break the possibility of executing it in parallel. So if this fail, of course you don't have to look at the second one because you know that it's going to be able to execute in parallel. But suppose this pass, but this one failed, then you know also you will not be able to execute in parallel as well. Okay? Now take note, it doesn't mean that this one pass, this one will pass. It can be that this one pass, this one fail, or this one fail, this one pass. It can be something like this. So it does not mean that the first one pass, the second one fail, because it depends on how you process it. Does this iteration rely on the data before, or on the second one? Sorry. The first one is iteration 1, the first one means the second one rely on the first. The second condition is this one rely on the data in the second iteration. Okay, so it depends on what kind of algorithm they got. Okay, the third one is slightly different. Iteration 1 does not write into the same location as iteration 2. That means if this guy tried to write, this guy also tried to write, but they don't write into the same. If they write into the same location, that means they are dependent on one another. Okay, even though they are not reading, they are writing into it. So this one actually is race condition. And this race condition also will not allow you to do in parallel, because if you do in parallel, they're going to race with one another and the result will not be correct. Okay? So either one of these fail, or one of these conditions fail, that means you cannot do current execution in the iteration. Okay, I'll explain more about the iteration later. Just now, example, I talked about statements. This one is iteration. Okay. If all of them pass, that means it is safe to execute them in parallel. Okay. Okay. So this forms the basis of all loop parallelism of the them we want to look at later. Okay. If you look at the left-hand side. The left-hand side actually has has flow dependency. Okay, this one has flow dependency. The second one don't have flow dependency. Okay? Flow dependency, I'll explain in a short while. What it means is this: if you look at the first instruction, okay, this one is not iteration parallelism. We're talking about data parallelism. Sorry, data parallelism without iteration for simplicity. Okay, if you look at this two statement here, how do you find C? You find C by multiplying A with B, and then you get the C. How do you find B? You find B by multiplying 2 with C. But this C is actually the previous C. That means this statement depends on this statement, right? It depends on this value here. That means it has flow dependency. There's a flow dependency because the program will run step by step in the flow. So this is flow dependency. And this flow dependency will not allow you to execute this independently. That means cannot allow you to run them in parallel. Okay, of course, normally you don't run them in parallel because this one is a simple example. But the idea is that. Now, let's look at the second one. The second one, C is computed by A multiplied by B. And then D is computed by 2 multiplied by B. And then E, A plus B. And you can see that when it relies on D, but B is not on the left-hand side. It's not updated, right? Okay, so that means there's no flow dependency from here to here, or here to here, or here to here. There's no flow dependency as well. Even though you can see that this one actually get from the same data, but that data doesn't change, right? So there's no flow dependency here. Okay, so in this case, you can actually run all of this statement in parallel. Okay, without waiting on one another. Of course, this is not practical, but just to explain the data dependency. Now, there are 3 different types of data dependency. Actually, there are 4 there. But the fourth one is not written because the fourth one actually we don't have to look at it. Okay, there are 4 different types. Only 3 that is important to us. The first one is flow dependence. The flow dependence is also called true dependence. Okay, the true dependence means it relies on the previous statement, just like what we see at the top. Okay, don't know what flow or true dependence is, you refer to example. I prefer to use this example rather than the description to understand. You can see that C is computed, and then later on, D actually used the data that is written before. So there is a flow dependency there. Okay, so that is true dependency. Why is it called true dependency? True dependency means if you have this kind of problem, get this issue, you cannot do anything. That is true dependency. You cannot change anything. Okay? The other 2, anti-dependence and output dependence, these are called false dependence. So you got true dependence and you got false dependence. Okay, what does it mean? True dependence means if you encounter it, you don't hope that you can do any parameter, forget about it. But if you encounter anti-dependence, actually this is also dependency. You see there is a dependency there. And that is called anti-dependence. The other type, also dependency, is called auto-dependence. In original form, if you run that in parallel, it will fail because they are dependent on one another. But you can change them. You can change slightly so that it becomes no dependence. So that's why it's called false dependence. That means it's not really, there's no really dependency there. It just looks like it has dependency, so it's got false dependence. Okay, so these two dependents. Okay? So these two here is false dependence. This one here is true dependence. This one, if there's no hope, this one is you have hope. Okay? The true dependent also, the name actually is flow dependence. So you can use the term interchangeably. But for false dependent, is actually talking about these two. This is flow dependent, this is also flow dependent. But there are two different categories. Okay, this one is actually effective dependence, depending on how it works. So let's look at the description. For true dependence, or flow dependence, the true dependence between S1 and S2 means that S1 writes into location later read by S2. Okay, this is how we write it. We write S1, okay, S1, like that. And then this is the location later read. If you see this notation, it means this. Okay, we put T here. This T means true dependence. Okay, and then S2. Okay, the way we read it is like what is written here. S1 writes into a location where S2 read again. Okay, so this is how we write it. So if you see this in your mind, you have to think it this way. Okay. Now the second one is anti-dependence. As anti-dependence, we write it like this: S1 with the arrow also, but this time is A, S2. Okay, actually the symbol is this is the you can imagine that this is one piece. Okay, just like this, it's written in multiple characters, right? So this one means S1 has a dependency on S2. Okay, that means S1 right into where S2 will read from. Okay, true dependency. The second one is S1 has anti-dependency to S2. Okay, so what it is? It's actually S1 read from location later written by S2. So just now, this one right into somewhere where this S2 is right by reading, right? But here is the reverse. It's the reverse of it. That's why it's called anti. The reverse of it. Okay? So it's S1 that is reading from S2 that's writing. Okay? So S2 is S1 will read from the location that is later written by S2. Now, when you put the number, the statement number, right? If you see S1 here, it means that this statement comes first. S2, this statement comes later. So this one comes first, this statement comes first, this one comes later. Right? So when you read here, you have to be careful. S1 read from the location later, written to by S2. That means this statement happens later. Okay? You read first, but actually later on, that memory location is written by S2. Okay, you have to make that distinction. Okay? It's not that you read before, you read after S2 has written. Okay, so take note of that. So that is anti-dependence. How about the output dependence? Output dependence is written like this: S1. There's a mistake here. This PDF, right? I can't change it. Sorry, it's not PDF. Actually, it's image. Sorry about it because I seldom teach this object. That's why I have no time to actually change it. Sorry about it. Please take note. There's a mistake there. S1. There's an arrow there, but there's an O here, not I. O. That's how you write it. Why is it O? Very simply, because it literally is O, isn't it? It's A, actually it's A. T because of the T. Okay? Okay, there is another one. Another one is input dependence, but the input dependence is not there. Because the input dependence actually, it doesn't matter actually. Okay, that's why it's not in the list here. But actually it exists. We have input dependence. The input dependence is I. So that's why we detect, we find out. If we see I, then we know that it's input dependence. But of course, as I said before, we don't worry about it because it doesn't do any harm here, so we remove it. Okay? but input dependence actually exists. Just that we don't talk about it because it doesn't make sense in our system. Okay, so input-output dependence means that S1 and S2 read from the same location. So it read from the same location, and therefore they are input dependence. Okay, let's look at an example. Okay, let's look at the two dependence first. You got statement 0, statement 1, and statement 2. Now here it doesn't mention it, but we are only looking at statement 1 and statement 2. We are only looking at these two. Don't look at S0, because if you look at the way we write, we write that is S1, 2 dependence on S2. That means we are focusing on this one. We don't focus on that. If we want to focus on this, then we will write that is S0, S1, or S0, S2, right? But we are only looking at the first one to write like this. Okay? Now, of course, if you look at it, if let's say initialize, for example, you initialize like this, right? So this D actually depends on S0. But in this statement here, we are only looking at this, we are not looking at S0. S0 is there, it's just to tell you that A and B is actually integer. A and B also is integer, but B initial value is not S1. Okay, so don't look at this, because we are only looking at this two statement. Okay, when we talk about this problem. Right? Okay, let's look at two dependency. A equals, let me assign 2 to A, and then you can see that A is used here, is red, and this one is written, this one is red, and therefore S1 has 2 dependency on S2. Why? Because it's right into a variable where the second statement read. Okay? So S1 has 2 dependency on S2. This is how we write. Okay? So we write in Word like this, but when we write in computer notation, we write like this. So anybody who read this, they know that this is what we mean. Okay? Okay, how about anti-dependence? Anti-dependence is looking at this, but we have to see whether it's dependent or not. What is anti-dependence? Anti-dependence means you read from the variable where it is later overwritten in the next statement. Okay? So let's say this. B initially is 40, right? And then you compute the A, and you use this, right? And this B later on is changed to -1. So because of that, this S1 has anti-dependence on S2. So this is how you read it. S1 has an anti-dependence on S2. Okay? So we write like this. Okay? So how do I know it? As I said before, B is used here is red. Okay, first, and after that, that B is changed. Okay, so there is anti-dependence. So you can see that they are actually quite dependent. Okay, what happens is this? Why this is a problem? This one is a problem you know very clearly, right? Okay, maybe I come back to you. Why you cannot run that in parallel? Suppose I run that in parallel. That means this one is run by one core, this one is run by one core, right? If statement 2, the core running on statement 2 is faster than the first core, then the result will be different, right? Now, because you use the data that is before is written in 2. Is it correct? The correct answer for this is A must be 2. If you run that in sequential, is it right? But if you run in parallel, you can use A first before A is written in 2. Then you get a different answer. That means it's not safe to run in parallel. You understand? Okay? So how about anti-dependence? Let's see this. If I assign a different processor, okay, or a different core, now I read the value, and also I write the value. Suppose this S2 run faster, then I will override with B minus 1. Okay? But here, actually B was 40. So if I run in sequential, B is 40. But if I run in parallel, if this run faster, then this one is minus 1. Then you get wrong answer. So therefore, these two statements cannot run in parallel. So this is antidependence, is a problem. Okay? So let's look at output dependence. Output dependence also you cannot run in parallel. If you identify it, you also cannot run in parallel. Okay, output dependence means you read from the data. You write into the same data. Output dependence. Let's go back here. Because I forgot to tell you this. Here it says output dependent, right? Here you make mistake. Here should be O. Here also mistake. This one is not input dependence, but it's output dependent. Right? Change this. This one is output dependence. Between S1 and S2 means that S1 and S2 write, not read, but write. Okay, make changes here. Here should be O. Here should be output. Here should be write. Okay, change that. Okay, so let's look at this. So B initially is 40. Okay, so you got it's a constant, so you don't have any problem there. So this one actually is no problem. But you see S1 right into A, S2 also right into A. Now if S1 right into A first, then S2 right into A. When you reach after this statement, you know that A is equal to 2. Is it correct? Right. If you run that in sequential, after S2, you know that A will contain 2, always. But if you run that in parallel, if this one is faster than this, there's no problem. If S2 is faster than S1, then you have a problem. Because initially A is assigned to 2, because it's faster. But S1 is slower. So it's going to take 14 minus 30. Okay, this is a very good example. Okay, don't use 40. Let's put it as 50. This is the example. Okay? So let's say B is equal to 50. So 50 minus 38. What do you get? You get 12, isn't it? Yeah. So you put 12 into A. Change this to 50, and then it's clear, because if it's 40, the result is 2. There's no difference there. Okay, but let's say if I put 50, then it will be 12. So right now, if this one is faster, you write 2. But this one is slower, right? So A eventually becomes 12. Okay? So it means that this is also a problem if I run them in parallel. So I cannot run them in parallel. This one I cannot run in parallel. This one I also cannot run in parallel. This one also I cannot run in parallel, because if I run in parallel, I will not get the same result always. I can get different result. Okay? Okay, true dependency is also called, here we talk about right after it. Okay, this right after it is actually this one. Okay, let's give a name here, because this one is not given, right? This one is this one is right after it. Okay, another name of it is antidependence. Okay, antidependence is right after it. Okay, now let's look at the other one first before I get it. The other one is here, which is this one, is right after right. Another name of it is right after right. Actually, this one is dependence. Yeah, actually, this is just the naming of it, because it's just the name. Because if you see sometimes, the right antidependence output dependence. But sometimes they don't write like this, they write right after read, right after write. Okay? If you see right after write, you know that it's anti-dependence. You're talking about the same thing. If you see right after write, you know that it's anti-dependence. Okay? Some people like right after read, right after write because it's very obvious. Okay, but actually it means this. This one is not so obvious. Maybe we call it independence and output dependence, but they're the same thing. Okay, so that is right after read. Right after read. Okay, then right after write. This one should be read after write. Okay, this one is read after write. Okay, there's another name as well here, but we don't in this slide doesn't say. So this one is read after write, this one right after read, this one is right after write. Then how do I know? You just look at the way the description of the dependency. Okay, let's look at the right after read. Okay. Why is it called right after read? Remember anti-dependence? Anti-dependence means this guy, S1, read after S2, S2 right to that variable after. Okay? That means if read, if right after read. That's one great for later. Yeah, correct. So it means that S2 is right after your break. Okay, so S1 read first, S2 is right later. Because it says right after read, right? That means you write after the reading is done. That means S1, read first. Read, write. Okay? You write after you read. Okay? You write after you read. Right? So this one is right after write. Right? After write. Okay, so if you read in the reverse, you read this right after read, right after write. Okay? Same thing here. This one is read after write. Okay? Okay, so let's look at this right after read. Now, right after read, the problem is this. You have, let's see, second term equal to C, skill 2. Which one do you use? Okay, you got 4 statements there. First statement, S1, S2, S3, S4. It does not say which one is which. I think it is S2 right after sorry about this. This one is not clear. We are talking about this statement and this statement. This two statements. Okay? This two statements. So you got S1, S2, S3, S4. When we talk about this dependency, we want to look at these two. Of course, you can look at these two, 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 these two. But in this example here, I'm pretty sure that you want to look at these two. Okay? Even though it doesn't specify, maybe you highlight it, draw a box here. Okay? Because when we talk about right after read, we are taking this right after read. Right? So what is it right after read? Because you read first, you write later. Okay, so this is right after read. This is S1 and S2. Okay? Now this, as I said before just now, is form dependency, meaning that anti-dependent is false dependence. It means it is not true dependence. If I were to change it, I can make it non-dependence. Okay, if I run this as is, then there will be a problem. Remember I mentioned to you just now? Anti-dependence, earlier on, if you run it, it will have problem. Why? See this sum here? Let's say I allow one core to run this, the next core to run this. If this one is faster, then the result is different. If this core is faster, this core is slower, then why? Because it will run in sequence, which is correct. But then if this is faster than this, then they'll give you a different result. That means if you run parallel, you will not get a consistent result. Sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's wrong. Okay? So this anti-dependence is a problem. Okay, you cannot run that in parallel. But if you change the program slightly, now it becomes non-dependent. You have to do it. And also, you always run parallel. Okay, so what is the difference between these two programs? First thing is I rename this sum to sum 1. And I rename this name to sum 2. Okay, this name to sum 2. Now, if you look at the code now, this sum 1 actually is used here. Okay? And when I write, I don't write into sum 1, I write into sum 2. Okay, I write into sum 2. And this sum 2 is used here. Okay, now let's look at this two part again. Right? So are they dependent on one another? Just now, yes. Look at the sum here, yes. If you look here, no. It's not the same variable anymore, and therefore there are no dependency here. So here there is dependency, is anti-dependence. If you don't do anything to it, it will fail. If you assign them in parallel, that means you run them in parallel, right? Because if you run them in parallel, they will run different speed, and they will give you, every time you run, they will give you different results. But here, it will always give you the same result, and the answer is always correct. If I change the name, okay? So how would I change? I change this to somehow, or if I put it as a sum, here's sum, and this one is changed to sum. So, that means this actually the original name. Only this one you change it to sum, but of course you have to change this as well, because it's all these. Okay? So, if I do this, then there is no dependency. That's why I call it's called dependency, because if you change or if I rename it, then it will become a non-dependence, and therefore you can run that in parallel. And if you run that in parallel, they always give you the same result as the first one. Okay, see the difference? And if you want to how come I can change the name? Isn't it here? It's the same? Okay, let's look at it again. If you look at the original code, you go like this code here. This sum, the value comes from where? The value comes from this sum, right? Okay, this value, this value. To compute this first time. But then the second two statement, I recompute the sum. And this recompute sum actually is used here. It's not used before, it's used after. Okay? That means these two actually supposed to be two different variables. It can be assigned to different variables. Okay? Now, in the first case, because you assign to the same name, therefore these two become dependent. Okay? If you run that in parallel, you see who is faster, and then you get different results. But if you do this, then you will get always the same result as if you run in parallel, because this two actually is not, it does not need to be dependent. Here you make it dependent, that's why it's called cross dependent. It looks like it's dependent, actually they are not dependent. You just need to change it. Now, if you don't change the name, you'll fail. You have to change the name in order for it to pass. Is that clear? Okay, so this false dependence. If you see this, you know that you identify it as antidependent, you immediately know that this false dependence, you can change it. Once you change it, now it is false, it becomes no dependency at all. Okay, so right now you can write that in parallel. Okay, when I say run in parallel, it's only this statement here. This two is not independent because this sum one depends on this. So this two is true dependence. This two is also true dependence. But right now, this one is no more anti-dependence. Here, true dependence, anti-dependence, true dependence. This one is true dependence, no dependency, true dependence. Okay? So you can run this in one call and you can run this in one call. Because when you run in one call, this one always runs on season. This one also runs. Run this first and run. This one will run first and run. But these two things you can run in parallel without having dependency between them and there is no problem. And whenever they run, they always give you the same result. Okay, let's look at the antidependence. Also the same thing. This is the false dependence. Let's look at another example. This is right after right. Okay, you write into something that is written again. Okay? So right after right is actually the same problem. Right after right is this one. Okay. Actually you can pick this or you can pick this. Let's see. Actually it's all. Okay, so this is an output dependence. This one is also output dependence. Okay? And you just need to change the variable. Okay, the same thing. You rewrite the variable, and actually you get sum one here, and then sum two there, and then now it becomes no dependence. Okay? But of course here you still have dependency. This also has dependency. Okay, so these are output dependence. Is that clear? Oh, sorry, I pointed the wrong one. I should be looking at these two. This one and this one. This two. This two. Not this two, this two. This first one is because right after one, isn't it? So is these two statements here output dependence? Yes. Because you write after you write. Okay? So in order to make sure that this two is not dependent, then you change it. Sum one, sum two. Okay? And you can change it because sum one is only used here, sum two is only used here. Okay? So you can change this. Okay? So this is also dependent. I suggested you highlight because this slide you don't highlight, so to look for how in order to understand which one you're talking about. In this slide, we are talking of this is S1, this is S2. Okay? In the previous slide, we are looking at this. We are looking at this two. Okay? S1 here, S2. Okay, we are done with the data dependency. Now we have to look at control dependency. Now control dependency is, we have condition here. We look at S1. S1 has a condition. And if this D is not equal to 0, then you will skip this statement. If D is equal to 0, if D equal to 0, you continue. That means you will go back without executing this. Okay, that means you will loop again, but you will not execute this. But if D is not equal to 0, then you will not continue, meaning that you will execute this instruction. So this instruction has to depend on this instruction, whether to execute or not to execute. So that is control dependency. That means the execution, whether you execute that statement or not, depends on the previous statement. So that is control dependency. Okay, it has something to do with your code. Okay, dependency has two different types. One is loop carry dependency, It's not time to finish. 4:30, is it? 4.
Oh.
Okay, finish already.
Okay.
I cannot finish this. Okay, I think I'll continue this one next week because this one, control divided says I have to talk. I have to explain a little bit more in order to make things much clearer. Then I'll stop there. I'll discuss that. Okay, I'll write down the attendance. Regarding the assignment, you have to make sure that you have two program. The first program is parallel computing. Okay? Because you need base based run using a single processor. Then only you can do comparison. Okay, if you have only the parallel computing results, how you going to compare? Okay, so that's the first thing. So you need one in sequential, that means using a single processor, and then parallel computing, and then you compare the result. Second thing is, you need to have multiple samples, not only one sample. And your sample cannot be small. It needs to be very, very big. Okay? Because some of you showed to me, is this considered okay? And I see 0.001 second. Okay, it's not long, too small. Your problem is too small. Because you can complete your task in microseconds, 0.001 millisecond. Okay, if you compare the performance of okay, make sure that your sample size is big and make sure that you have multiple samples so that you can put in graph the performance. Therefore, only one single sample, one many samples. And your sample size changes, so it's small, big one. So that is
Yeah,